Naturally, we all want to build the best PCs possible and at the lowest price possible, but there's some things a lot of people do that really works against that, buying parts that really don't make sense for the rest of the build. So let's talk about something you should probably stop doing if you want the best possible value from your PC. Starting off with a pretty popular one, and that is the amount of RAM you need in your PC. It still boggles my mind that some people even sell pre-built PCs with just 8 GB of RAM, including Apple of all people. And even people who build PCs from scratch often go for just 8 GB, which is simply not enough. Granted, you won't see a big improvement in gaming performance directly between 8 and 16 GB, but the second you have more programs loaded in at once, for example a browser, a music player, and of course all the different game launchers you may need, that RAM is going to fill up fast. In fact, even beyond gaming, at idle, your PC can well exceed 8 GB nowadays. So 16 GB is an absolute minimum. However, that also means a lot of people may be going a bit overboard and going straight for 32 GB. If you need that much, well, it's a bit more questionable. If you do any amount of video editing, or if you use a lot of layers in Photoshop, 32 gigs of RAM in those instances will be a night and day difference between just 16. And with DDR4 prices actually being pretty decent nowadays, that upgrade won't even cost you that much. That doesn't really apply to DDR5 pricing though, because DDR5 pricing is still off its meds. Now that we talked about volatile memory, let's talk about some that is less volatile than your average Reddit user, and that is your permanent storage. More specifically, SATA SSDs, because, well, they're kind of pointless nowadays. Because of the advances recently made in PCIe NVMe SSDs, those things are almost on par cost-wise per terabyte compared to normal SATA SSDs. And with that you get much higher speeds. So because of the prices being almost identical for the two, SATA SSDs should be kind of avoided if you can get much better performance with a M.2 NVMe SSD instead. Unless you can just find a great deal for one, then you'll be definitely way better off with one of these more future-proof and modern NVMe SSDs. And if you're in need of a good NVMe SSD, we're going to have one linked down in the video description below. And if you use that Amazon associates links, you don't pay anything extra while we get some of the money that gets reinvested straight back into the channel. Not to mention that it also means that Jeff Bezos is getting less of the money himself, so that's a good thing. Am I right, fellow billionaire hating Zoomers, I guess? Anyway, next up, let's talk about cooling. It's another thing that people either overspend on or don't spend enough on and then are confused why their PC really isn't performing that well. Many people may be wasting a lot of money for high-end cooling even though they have a perfectly good stock cooler that usually comes with a CPU. So yeah, don't do that. If your CPU's TDP is about 70 watts or so or less, you really don't need anything other than the stock cooler it comes with, so don't really bother spending more money on an additional aftermarket cooler. But I know what some people may be saying, but Avrana, aftermarket CPU coolers are so much quieter, so why wouldn't people go for them? Well, because many people may not even notice the difference. When your CPU isn't really running that hot anyway, plus your CPU's inside, you know, a case, the noise emitted by just the CPU cooler itself mayn't even be that much. Not to mention there's also other case fans that also handle airflow that reduce the overall noise of the system if you use good quality fans. So definitely don't overspend on your cooler. And while it's not a perfect guide, try to look for the TDP that your CPU is rated for and then compare that to the rated TDP of a CPU cooler. So that way you know exactly what kind of CPU cooler to buy and how much headroom you have left for things like overclocking or reducing the fan curve in order to get a more silent build. For a fourth thing, let's talk about power supplies. You know, the things that keep your PC fed with power and prevent it from blowing up. And seeing how power supplies can be a bit expensive, many people just go for the PSU that provides just the right amount of wattage for what they need, which is kind of a waste of money. Because that way, if you want to upgrade in the future, you're also going to have to buy a whole new power supply, which is never going to be cheap, especially seeing how power hungry graphics cards are nowadays. If you want to upgrade them in the future, which you probably do if you want to continue to play games at high settings and a high resolution, then you are going to have to upgrade your PSU in the future as well. So it's one of those cases where you can spend around $40 more now just to be able to save, say, $80 more in the future. So I guess the call is up to you. Not to mention the fact that having a PSU with more headroom also means that the fan doesn't have to ramp as much, resulting in a much quieter build. Plus, higher wattage PSUs also usually have better components and more protections in place. And finally, the fifth point, and probably the most controversial one, because many people who want to go into gaming only look for PCs. Well, that's not something you should limit yourself to, because if you just want a super budget gaming experience, don't overspend on a PC when you can just get a different kind of PC. You can get a console. Okay, PC Master Race, lay off me. I know it can be a controversial take, but I mean, consoles are kind of in a great spot nowadays. Seeing how they just cost a couple $100 each, the performance they provide, well, you simply can't match that with off-the-shelf parts when building your own PC. So if you just want to play games and don't have a proper PC, consoles may be the way to go, especially on the Xbox side. Because if you're looking for a good deal, I mean, Xbox All Access is pretty amazing. Seeing how you can get an Xbox Series X for like $35 a month, and that is already with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, so you also get all the games you could ever want with it. That is actually a great deal, and something that you simply cannot match when building your own PC. So I definitely can't wait to hear the comments on that spicy take. But if you found this video helpful in any way, and you want to help support this channel so I can make more cool videos in the future, then the best way to do that is to support us on Patreon. Because even just $1 single a month truly goes a long way, while you get awesome perks as well. I'd also love to thank my existing patrons, Gavin Burns, Ryan, OKB, Meg Sumner, Shane Allcroft, Lansby, and Jesse Herbman. Thank you guys so much, support truly goes a long way. Then you're also going to find our merch store, our social media links, and our Discord server as well. But anyway, that's about it, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to subscribe, like, whatever, and I'll see you all in whatever I make next. Goodbye everyone, goodbye.